Hi, I'm Mr. Simons and welcome to this video, which is a little bit different from the other videos we've looked at. Instead of going through economic concepts, what we're going to do today is we're going to try and figure out the difference between affect and effect. So join me. In terms of what we're looking at today, I like to call it the world's greatest challenge, distinguishing between affect and effect. So what we're going to look at is what the difference is between these two confusing words. We're going to look at affect and effect in an economics in an economics context. And also I'm going to give you plenty of examples to try and really get the difference between these two terms. Let's start with affect. Affect is a verb. Now this means that it is an action. That means that it is all about doing something. So affect relates to having an influence or making a difference to something. So let's give you a couple of examples, or one example. So poverty affects many different groups in society. So this is where affect, where poverty is making a change to different groups in society. Let's think about effect. Effect is a noun, and a noun is a thing. Effect is the result of a change. So affect relates to something changing something else. Effect is the result of the change. Let's give you an example. The effect of a higher salary is to improve my quality of life. So there's the change, which is the higher salary, and then the result of the change, the effect, is to improve my quality of life. So remember, affect is to influence or to change. Effect is the result of a change. The weather will affect my plans for the weekend. The weather will influence or change my plans for the weekend. The food we eat affects our health. The food we eat changes or influences our health. Effect. The effect of the weather, the result of the change in the weather was to make the soccer field very muddy. The change was the weather. The effect was to make the soccer field very muddy. The effect of eating unhealthy food can be a greater risk of heart disease. So the result of the change being eating unhealthy foods, the effect of that, the result of that change is a greater risk of heart disease. And you can see that these two examples here match up with each other. So the weather here and the weather, the food and the food. So you can see in two similar contexts, affect and effect. So the first one here, changes in monetary policy will affect the level of economic growth in an economy. What we're talking about here is that changes in monetary policy will influence or change the level of economic growth. So affect is the right one to use here. Expansionary monetary policy, so for those that may be unfamiliar, low interest rates will generally have a positive effect on economic growth. So the effect here is that there is a change in monetary policy, it is expansionary, and then the effect of that change, effect with an E, is being looked at in terms of economic growth. How will that change in monetary policy then change or affect economic growth? So now what we're going to do is we're going to give you a chance to go through some examples. So let's remember our little hints. Effect, that causes the change. Effect, that's the result of the change. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put up two examples, and I strongly suggest you pause the video, give it a go, then restart the video and see what the answers are. So here are the two to consider. Number one, according to economic theory, a lower cash rate will positively something economic growth. Number two, the something of a lower cash rate is to stimulate economic growth. Before you start, let's give you two hints. Number one, a lower cash rate here is influencing economic growth. The second one, we're looking at the impact, the result of a lower cash rate. So now's the time to pause the video. Go on, pause the video. I'll go away and I'll come back ready for you to resume. Okay, so you've paused the video, you've given it a go. Now let's come back together. So the first one, according to economic theory, a lower cash rate will positively something economic growth. So a lower cash rate will positively change economic growth. So here is effect. A lower cash rate will influence economic growth. The second one is the something of a lower cash rate is to stimulate economic growth. So the effect of a lower cash rate is to stimulate economic growth. The government's decision to raise the level of the goods and services tax had a negative something on income inequality. Number 4, a change in the GST will disproportionately something low income earners because they spend a greater proportion of their income. So why don't you pause the video, give it an example, and I'll go away and come back again when you restart it. Okay, so let's try it. The first one here, number 3, the government's decision to raise the GST had a negative something on income inequality. So what we're looking at is we are looking at what is the result of the increase in a GST. So if I'm looking at the result of a change, I'm looking at effect. Now, number 4, a change in the GST will disproportionately something. So we're looking at what will the change do? What is going to influence or affect low-income earners? So effect and affect. Now the 2 quick examples. So monetary policy is mainly used to affect the level of inflation. Monetary policy is mainly used to affect the level of inflation. Monetary policy is being used to influence the level of inflation. If I look at the second example here, the change in fiscal policy would take effect from next year. The change in fiscal policy would take effect from next year. So what I'm looking at is the result of the change. The change will have its result from next year. So affect and effect in this situation. Okay, this is a particular confusing part of affect versus effect, but work with me. Sometimes affect with the E is used as a verb that means create, produce, or bring about. It's usually to talk about change. Confusing. Let's give you some examples. Number 1, we all hoped that the new Prime Minister would affect change in Australia. What we're saying here is we all hope that the new Prime Minister would bring about change in Australia. And for this situation, we use affect with the E. Another example, we have to act now if we're going to affect change, right? We're going to have to act now if we're going to create change, we have to act now. We're going to affect change. Third example, through the federal budget, the government is going to affect changes in tax rates. So through the federal budget, the government is going to bring about or create changes in tax rates. So that's how we can use affect with an E as well. Okay, so I hope you've enjoyed this video, or at least found it interesting. Make sure to subscribe and leave us a comment. Thanks for watching.